Chapter 1. A Dream of Oceans United. It was a bold dream. Imagine standing at the edge of the Atlantic Ocean, staring across a continent. On the other side, the Pacific Ocean sparkled in the sun. The two great oceans were separated by miles of land, jungle, and mountains. For centuries, people wondered, what if we could connect them? This dream began long ago. Explorers like Christopher Columbus and Vasco Núñez de Balboa sailed into the unknown. They were searching for gold, spices, and riches, but they found something else, an obstacle. The land of Central America stood between the Atlantic and the Pacific. Balboa was the first European to see both oceans. When he climbed a mountain in Panama in 1513, he stood in awe. Two massive bodies of water stretched out before him. What if, he must have thought, there was a way to unite them? Traders and kings in Europe also dreamed of this connection. A canal could save months of travel. In those days, ships had to sail all the way around the southern tip of South America, at Cape Horn. The journey was long, dangerous, and full of storms. Many sailors never made it home. A shorter route through Panama could save lives and money. It would change everything. In the 16th century, the Spanish king, Charles V, ordered his engineers to study the land. Could they build a canal? The engineers explored the thick jungles of Panama. They battled heat, rain, and mosquitoes. Their tools were simple, just shovels and pickaxes. The jungle seemed endless. Rivers were wild and strong. Mountains were tall and solid. After months of struggle, they reported back to the king. "It is impossible," they said. The dream did not die. Over the next few centuries, others took up the challenge. In the 1800s, the Industrial Revolution brought new machines. Steam-powered engines made digging easier. New maps of Panama showed paths that could work. One idea was to build a canal at sea level, like a straight line from ocean to ocean. Another plan suggested locks to lift ships over the hills. Each idea seemed clever, but none was easy. Imagine the excitement of those who believed it could be done. Inventors, engineers, and leaders around the world thought of the possibilities. A canal could bring nations closer, they said. It could make trade faster. They dreamed of ships sailing smoothly through the heart of Panama, carrying goods to every corner of the globe. But others were doubtful. "It's too risky," they warned. "The jungle is too dangerous. The cost is too high." By the late 19th century, a Frenchman named Ferdinand de Lesseps entered the story. Lesseps was already famous. He had built the Suez Canal in Egypt, which connected the Mediterranean Sea to the Red Sea. His success made him a hero. People trusted him. When he announced his plan to build a canal in Panama, crowds cheered. Investors gave him millions of dollars. Newspapers called him a genius. "If anyone can do it, Lesseps can," they said. But the challenge in Panama was different. The Suez Canal had been built in flat, dry desert land. Panama was wild and unpredictable. The jungle was alive with snakes, insects, and disease. Heavy rains caused rivers to flood. Landslides buried workers. People whispered, "Can Lesseps really succeed?" For many, the dream of connecting the oceans became personal. Immigrants from around the world arrived in Panama to join the project. They came from France, the Caribbean, China, and even as far away as Europe and Asia. They believed in the dream. These men and women were ready to dig, to work, and to build. But they didn't know what awaited them. Diseases like malaria and yellow fever spread quickly. Mosquitoes carried death, and doctors didn't know how to stop it. Every day, workers fell ill. Some recovered, but many did not. Fear grew among the laborers. Every cough, every fever brought panic. In the evenings, workers sat by campfires, wondering if they would see the morning. Even the land itself seemed to fight back. Deep valleys filled with mud after heavy rains. Workers dug and dug, but their progress vanished as the mud returned. "We're building a hole in water," one frustrated worker said. Equipment broke under the weight of the soil. Time and money ran out. The French project collapsed in failure. The dream seemed lost again. Yet, even in failure, the dream refused to die. Stories of the Panama Canal continued to inspire. Explorers had seen the possibilities. Traders imagined the riches it could bring. Engineers believed technology would one day overcome the challenges. And workers, despite the hardships, had shown their strength and courage. The dream of uniting the oceans wasn't just about trade or profit. It was about connecting the world. It was about proving that humanity could achieve the impossible. As this chapter closes, we leave the story at a crossroads. The French had tried and failed, but the dream was still alive. What would it take to make it a reality? Who would step forward to conquer the jungle, the mountains, and the disease? Could anyone truly bring the two oceans together? Stay with us as the journey continues. The path between oceans is waiting, and the greatest challenge is yet to come. Chapter 2. The French Try and Fail. In the late 1800s, Panama was buzzing with excitement. A famous man had arrived. His name was Ferdinand de Lesseps, the builder of the Suez Canal. Everyone knew his name. He had done the impossible before, and now he had a new dream. He wanted to connect the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans by building a canal in Panama. People called him a hero. They believed he could succeed. Lesseps was confident. He had built a canal in Egypt, and it had changed the world. Ships no longer had to sail around Africa. The Suez Canal saved time, money, and lives. Lesseps believed Panama would be the same. "This will be easy," he said. He promised to finish the canal in just a few years. Investors rushed to give him money. Newspapers praised him. It seemed nothing could go wrong. But Panama was different. The land was not flat like Egypt. Thick jungles covered the ground. Mountains blocked the way. Rivers rushed through the valleys. And the weather? It rained almost every day. Heavy rains turned the ground to mud. Still, Lesseps was not worried. "We will build a sea-level canal," he said, "just like in Suez." His confidence inspired thousands of workers to join him. They came from France, the Caribbean, China, and beyond. They believed in the dream. Work began in 1881. The workers dug into the earth with shovels and pickaxes. Steam-powered machines helped move the dirt. Day after day, the sounds of digging and hammering filled the air. It was hard, back-breaking work, but the workers were determined. They wanted to be part of history. At first, progress seemed steady. Trenches were dug, and plans were made for massive bridges. Lesseps often visited the site, smiling and waving at the workers. He told them, "We are building the future." His words gave them hope. But hope was not enough. Soon, problems began to appear. The land was unstable. Heavy rains caused landslides. Tons of mud and rock fell back into the trenches. Workers had to dig the same areas again and again. Frustration grew. The jungle seemed to fight against them at every turn. And then there was the heat. The sun burned hot during the day, and the humidity was suffocating. At night, mosquitoes swarmed the workers' camps. Many became sick. At first, people thought it was just a fever, but it wasn't. Malaria and yellow fever spread quickly. One by one, workers fell ill. They lay in their bunks, sweating and shaking. Some never woke up. The hospitals were full. The doctors didn't know what to do. They didn't understand that mosquitoes carried the diseases. Instead, they blamed the jungle air. Workers burned fires at night, hoping to keep the bad air away. It didn't help. Fear spread faster than the disease. Every cough, every ache made people panic. Workers began to leave. They didn't want to die in Panama. Despite the sickness, Lesseps refused to give up. He believed the project could still succeed. He brought in more workers and more machines. The costs rose higher and higher. Investors started to worry. They asked, "Where is our money going?" Lesseps promised them, "The canal will be finished soon." But deep down, even he started to have doubts. Then came the floods. In 1885, the Chagres River overflowed its banks. The water rushed through the trenches, destroying weeks of work. Machines were buried in mud. Workers had to start all over again. The rain seemed endless. Every time progress was made, the jungle and rivers took it away. By now, the newspapers were turning against Lesseps. They called the project a disaster. Rumors spread that the money was running out. Investors demanded answers. Lesseps held meetings and gave speeches. He tried to stay positive, but his voice began to shake. The dream was slipping away. In 1889, it all came crashing down. The money was gone. The workers had left. The equipment was broken. The French project was declared a failure. Lesseps was heartbroken. He had believed in the dream so strongly. Now, it was over. But the failure was not just about money or machines. More than 20,000 workers had died. They came to Panama full of hope. They left behind families and friends who would never see them again. The jungles of Panama became their graves. The French effort had failed, but it taught the world important lessons. Building a canal in Panama would not be easy. It would take more than money and machines. It would take knowledge, planning, and determination. The dream of connecting the oceans did not die with Lesseps. The idea was too powerful to be forgotten. For now, Panama was quiet. The jungle reclaimed the trenches. The rivers flowed over the unfinished work. But deep beneath the surface, the dream still lived. It waited for someone brave enough, strong enough, and wise enough to try again. Chapter 3. The Jungle Fights. Back. Panama was a land of beauty, but also danger. Tall trees stretched into the sky, their branches thick with leaves. The jungle was alive with sounds, birds chirping, insects buzzing, and rivers rushing through the valleys. To some, it looked like paradise. To others, it was a nightmare. For the workers who came to build the canal, the jungle was an enemy. It was hot. The air felt heavy, like a wet blanket. The sun beat down during the day, and at night the rain poured hard. Sometimes the rain didn't stop for days. The ground turned to mud, thick and sticky. Workers' boots sank with every step. Machines got stuck. Progress slowed. Then there were the mosquitoes. They were everywhere. They swarmed around workers, biting their skin. Most people thought mosquitoes were just annoying. They didn't know the truth. These tiny insects carried deadly diseases, malaria and yellow fever. At first, it started like the flu. Workers felt tired and weak. They had fevers and chills. Their heads pounded. Some recovered after a few days. But for others, the sickness got worse. Their skin turned yellow. Their bodies shook, and they struggled to breathe. Many didn't survive. Hospitals filled quickly, but doctors couldn't help. They didn't understand what caused the diseases. Fear spread through the camps. Workers whispered to each other at night. Who will get sick next? The jungle also brought other dangers. Snakes slid silently through the grass. Some were deadly, with venom that could kill in minutes. Jaguars roamed the forest, their golden eyes glowing in the dark. And then there was the constant hum of insects. Biting flies and ants added to the misery. Some workers tried to cover their skin with cloth, but it didn't help. The jungle always found a way through. Food and water were another challenge. Fresh supplies were hard to find in the jungle. Many workers had to eat canned food or salted meat brought from far away. The heat spoiled it quickly. Drinking water was often dirty. Some workers got sick from the water, too. It seemed like everything in Panama was against them. Even the land itself was a problem. The jungle was not flat. Hills and mountains stood in the way. Trees had to be cut down. Rivers had to be controlled. Sometimes, workers blasted the hills with dynamite. The explosions shook the ground, and rocks rained down. It was dangerous work. Accidents were common. Landslides were the worst. After a heavy rain, the soil became loose. Huge amounts of dirt and rock slid down the hills, burying machines and men. Some workers barely escaped. Others were not so lucky. The jungle is alive, they said. It wants to stop us. But the workers were brave. They didn't give up easily. They came from all over the world. Some were French, others were from the Caribbean, and many came from China and Africa. They spoke different languages, but they shared a common goal. They wanted to build something great. They wanted to change the world. Still, life in the camps was hard. Workers slept in small huts made of wood and metal. The roofs leaked when it rained. Inside, it was crowded and hot. Some workers tried to write letters home. They wrote about the beauty of the jungle, the challenges they faced, and their dreams of success. But they also wrote about the fear. "If I get sick," one worker wrote, "tell my family I tried my best." For some, the dream of the canal turned into a nightmare. They had come to Panama full of hope, but now they wanted to leave. Ships carried sick and injured workers back to their homes. Many never returned to Panama. Others stayed, determined to finish what they had started. One day, a young worker from the Caribbean stood near the river, watching the water rush by. He wiped the sweat from his face. His friend, an older man from France, walked over and sat beside him. The younger man sighed and said, "Do you think we'll ever finish this canal?" The older man looked at the jungle, then at the river. He shook his head slowly. "I don't know," he said, "but if we don't try, who will?" These small moments of courage kept the workers going. They knew the odds were against them. The jungle was strong. The diseases were deadly. The work seemed endless. But still, they picked up their shovels each day. They started the machines. They wiped the sweat from their faces and dug deeper into the earth. Even the leaders struggled. Ferdinand de Lesseps, who had dreamed of this canal, began to lose hope. He saw the sickness, the landslides, and the empty camps. Money was running out. Investors were angry. Still, Lesseps tried to stay positive. He visited the workers and encouraged them. But his voice sounded weaker each time. Even a hero like Lesseps could not defeat the jungle. In the end, the French project failed. The jungle had won. The workers left, the machines rusted, and the trenches filled with water. The dream seemed over. The jungle grew back quickly, covering the scars left behind. But the story of the canal was not finished. Not yet. The failure taught important lessons. The jungle could not be ignored. It had to be understood and respected. The diseases needed to be studied and stopped. The work needed better planning. The next attempt would have to be smarter, stronger, and more determined. Chapter 4. A New Nation and a New Chance. The dream of the Panama Canal was not dead. It was only waiting for the right moment. The failure of the French had left deep scars, but it also left hope. The land, the rivers, and the mountains were still there. All that was needed was someone brave enough to try again. But first, something big had to happen. Panama itself needed to be free. At the start of the 20th century, Panama was not an independent country. It was part of Colombia. Many people in Panama wanted their own nation. They were tired of being ruled from far away. The idea of freedom grew stronger each year. But Colombia was not ready to let Panama go. Then came the United States. Across the world, America was growing stronger. Its leaders wanted more power, more trade, and more influence. A canal in Panama would give them all three. It would connect the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, making trade faster and cheaper. The canal would also help America's Navy move quickly between oceans. To the U.S., the canal was not just a dream. It was a necessity. The U.S. tried to make a deal with Colombia. President Theodore Roosevelt, a man of action and strong opinions, led the negotiations. Roosevelt believed in the canal. He believed it was America's destiny to build it. But Colombia refused the deal. They wanted more money and more control. Roosevelt was furious. "They are standing in the way of progress," he said. Then, a new plan emerged. If Colombia would not agree, maybe Panama would. Roosevelt learned about the growing independence movement in Panama. He knew the people there wanted freedom. Quietly, the U.S. began to support Panama's fight for independence. They sent ships to the area. They promised to protect Panama if it broke away from Colombia. The tension grew. On November 3, 1903, the people of Panama took a bold step. They declared independence from Colombia. It was a moment of hope, but also great danger. Colombia did not want to lose Panama. They sent troops to stop the rebellion. The people of Panama feared they would lose their chance for freedom. But the U.S. acted quickly. American warships blocked Colombia's forces from entering Panama. The message was clear. The U.S. would not let Panama fall. After a few tense days, Colombia gave up. Panama was free. Cheers filled the streets of Panama City. Flags waved, and people celebrated their new nation. However, freedom came with a price. Almost immediately, Panama signed a treaty with the U.S. The Americans would build and control the canal. In return, Panama would receive money and protection. Some Panamanians were unhappy with the deal. They wanted more control over their land. But for many, it was worth it. The canal would bring jobs, progress, and a brighter future. Work on the canal began again. This time, the Americans were in charge. They brought new ideas, new machines, and new plans. They learned from the mistakes of the French. Roosevelt himself visited the canal site in 1906. He was the first U.S. president to leave the country while in office. Pictures of Roosevelt standing beside workers and machines spread across the world. His visit inspired confidence. It showed that the U.S. was serious about finishing the canal. But the challenges were still great. The jungle was as dangerous as ever. The heat was just as intense. Mosquitoes still spread malaria and yellow fever. The rivers still flooded after heavy rains. Every day brought new problems. The U.S. knew they needed to solve the disease problem first. Dr. William Gorgas, a military doctor, was sent to Panama. He believed mosquitoes were the cause of the sickness. Not everyone agreed with him at first, but Gorgas was determined. He led efforts to drain swamps, remove standing water, and fumigate homes. Slowly, the diseases began to disappear. Workers started to feel safer. Camps were cleaner. Hospitals emptied. It was a small victory, but an important one. Next came the engineering. The Americans decided not to build a sea-level canal like the French had tried. Instead, they would use locks. These locks would lift ships over the hills and mountains, then lower them back down. It was a brilliant idea, but building the locks was no small task. It required precision, teamwork, and patience. The workers came from many countries. Some were from the U.S., but most were from the Caribbean. They worked long hours under the blazing sun. They dug through rock and dirt. They built railways to carry the soil away. They poured concrete for the locks. It was hard work, but they believed in the project. They wanted to be part of history. The relationship between Panama and the U.S. was not always easy. Some Panamanians felt like their country was being controlled by a foreign power. They saw the Canal Zone as a place where Americans ruled, and Panamanians were not welcome. There were protests and disagreements, but the hope of a better future kept the dream alive. The new nation of Panama faced many challenges. Its economy was small and its government was young. But the canal gave it a chance to grow. It brought people, money, and attention to this small strip of land. Panama's leaders hoped the canal would one day belong to their people. Chapter 5. Theodore Roosevelt's Bold Vision. Theodore Roosevelt was not an ordinary president. He was full of energy and passion. He believed in taking action, not just talking about it. For Roosevelt, the Panama Canal was more than a project. It was a mission. He called it the greatest engineering achievement of the age. And he was determined to make it happen, no matter what. Roosevelt became president in 1901. At that time, the canal was still just a dream. The French had tried and failed. Panama had just become an independent nation. The jungles, rivers, and diseases seemed impossible to conquer. But Roosevelt saw opportunity. He believed the canal would change the world. It would connect two oceans, make trade faster, and help the U.S. become a global power. The canal must be built, he said, and it will be built. Many people doubted him. They said the jungle was too dangerous. They pointed to the French failure as proof that the canal was impossible. Roosevelt did not listen. He believed in American strength and ingenuity. He surrounded himself with experts, engineers, doctors, and planners who shared his vision. Together, they began to prepare for the challenge ahead. In 1904, the U.S. officially took control of the canal project. Roosevelt knew that leadership would be key. He appointed John Stevens, a brilliant engineer, to oversee the construction. Stevens was known for his ability to solve big problems. He started by focusing on the workers. Their living conditions were terrible: crowded huts, dirty water, and no protection from mosquitoes. Stevens worked with Dr. William Gorgas, who led the fight against disease. Together, they made the camp safer and cleaner. Swamps were drained, garbage was removed, and hospitals were built. Slowly, malaria and yellow fever began to disappear. But Roosevelt wanted more than just reports from his team. He wanted to see the canal for himself. In 1906, he became the first U.S. president to visit a foreign country while in office. His trip to Panama was historic and dramatic. When Roosevelt arrived, the workers greeted him with cheers. They had never seen a president before, and his presence gave them hope. Roosevelt didn't just stand and give speeches. He walked through the muddy construction sites. He talked to the workers. He shook their hands and listened to their stories. He climbed onto the machines and watched them in action. He even posed for a famous photograph, sitting on a giant steam shovel with a big grin on his face. Roosevelt's visit was more than a political move. It was personal. He wanted to show the world that he believed in the canal. "This is the greatest task ever undertaken by any nation," he declared. His words inspired the workers. They felt proud to be part of something so important. But the challenges were far from over. Building the canal was still incredibly difficult. The jungle seemed endless. Landslides buried equipment and slowed progress. Workers dug through mountains of solid rock. The heat was intense, and the rains never seemed to stop. Every day brought new problems to solve. One of the biggest challenges was the design of the canal. Roosevelt and his team had to decide, should it be a sea-level canal like the French had planned? Or should it use locks to lift and lower ships over the mountains? After careful study, the engineers chose locks. It was a bold decision. The locks would be massive structures, built to handle the largest ships in the world. They would require precision and teamwork. Failure was not an option. Roosevelt pushed the workers to keep going. "Perseverance," he said, "is the key to success." His leadership set the tone for the entire project. When problems arose, he encouraged creative solutions. When progress slowed, he reminded everyone of the goal. His determination kept the project moving forward. But Roosevelt's bold vision was not without criticism. Some people back home questioned the cost. Building the canal was expensive. Millions of dollars were being spent. Others worried about the politics. The U.S. had taken control of the canal zone, and some felt it was unfair to Panama. Protests broke out in Panama City. Roosevelt dismissed the critics. "Great achievements require great effort," he said. He believed the canal would benefit the world, and he would not let anything stand in the way. As the years passed, progress became more visible. The locks began to take shape. The mountains were cut down, inch by inch. The workers gained confidence. They started to believe that the canal could actually be finished. Roosevelt never returned to Panama, but he followed every detail of the project from Washington. He read reports, studied maps, and wrote letters of encouragement to the engineers. In 1909, he left office, but his influence on the canal remained. The workers often said, "We are building this for Roosevelt." Theodore Roosevelt's bold vision changed the course of history. Without his determination, the canal might never have been completed. He saw the potential, took the risks, and inspired others to believe. His famous visit to Panama showed the world what true leadership looks like. Before we begin Chapter 6, a quick note for our listeners. You're currently listening to this audiobook on Woo English. Remember, this content is specially made for Woo English listeners only. If you're hearing it on any other channel, it may be a violation of Woo English's rights. Please ensure you're tuned into the right source to fully enjoy and respect this audiobook journey. Now, let's continue the story. Chapter 6. Conquering Disease. The fight against disease in Panama was a battle like no other. The jungle was alive with danger, and the greatest threat came from something almost invisible. Tiny mosquitoes carried death in their bites. They spread malaria and yellow fever, deadly diseases that had already killed thousands of workers. If the canal was to be built, the diseases had to be stopped. But how? The American team in Panama knew the stakes. Workers were afraid. Hospitals were overcrowded. The air was filled with the cries of the sick. Every day, workers died. Some had only been in Panama for a few weeks. Families back home were heartbroken. It felt as if the jungle was winning. In 1904, Dr. William Gorgas arrived in Panama. He was not afraid of the challenge. Gorgas was a military doctor, and he had already fought yellow fever in Cuba. There, he had learned something important. Mosquitoes carried the disease. At the time, many people didn't believe him. They thought sickness came from bad air or dirty water, but Gorgas was sure. If we kill the mosquitoes, he said, we can stop the disease. Gorgas wasted no time. He created a plan to attack the mosquitoes. First, his team drained the swamps where the insects bred. Workers filled the low-lying areas with dirt and cleared the puddles left after heavy rains. The swamps were vast, and the work was hard. The heat was brutal, and the smell of rotting vegetation filled the air. But slowly, the water disappeared. The mosquitoes began to lose their homes. Next, Gorgas focused on standing water. Mosquitoes laid their eggs in barrels, buckets, and even tiny pools of rainwater. His team went from house to house, inspecting every corner. They dumped water, cleaned containers, and taught people to cover their water tanks. It was a massive effort. Thousands of homes had to be checked. Every drop of water counts, Gorgas told his team. Then came the fumigation. Workers carried cans of oil and sprayed it over ponds and streams. The oil created a thin layer on the water's surface, suffocating the mosquito larvae. They also used smoke to kill adult mosquitoes hiding in the grass and trees. Clouds of smoke rose over the camps and villages. It was a strange sight, but it worked. One of Gorgas's most important tools was education. He taught the workers how to protect themselves. He showed them how to use mosquito nets while they slept. He explained why it was important to keep their living areas clean. At first, some workers didn't listen. They thought it was too much trouble. But as they saw fewer people getting sick, they started to believe. The changes were dramatic. The hospitals, once overflowing with patients, began to empty. Fewer workers were dying. People started to feel safer. hope began to replace fear. The workers had more energy and confidence. They began to believe that the canal could actually be finished. But the fight was not over. Malaria was harder to control than yellow fever. Unlike yellow fever, it stayed in the body for weeks. Workers who thought they were healthy could still spread the disease. Gorgas and his team didn't give up. They expanded their efforts, searching for new ways to fight the mosquitoes. Their determination was unshakable. The progress was slow but steady. Over time, the death rates dropped sharply. In 1905, the number of workers dying from disease was cut in half. By 1906, it was even lower. The transformation was incredible. Panama, once called a death trap, was becoming a safer place to live and work. Gorgas became a hero. Workers praised him for his courage and intelligence. Leaders in Washington sent him letters of thanks. But Gorgas didn't seek fame. For him, the real reward was seeing the workers healthy and strong. He knew that every life saved brought the canal one step closer to completion. The fight against disease also brought people together. Workers from different countries learned to care for one another. They shared stories, meals, and laughter. The fear that had once divided them began to fade. They started to see themselves as part of something bigger, a team working toward a common goal. The success in Panama taught the world an important lesson. It showed the power of science and teamwork. It proved that even the smallest creatures, like mosquitoes, could be defeated with the right knowledge and tools. It was a victory not just for the canal, but for humanity. Chapter 7. Engineering Wonders. The Panama Canal was no ordinary construction project. It was one of the most ambitious engineering feats in history. Building a path between two oceans meant facing incredible challenges. Mountains had to be cut away, rivers had to be controlled, and massive locks, giant chambers to lift and lower ships, had to be built. The task seemed impossible, but the workers and engineers refused to give up. The heart of the canal project was the Gaillard Cut, also known as the Culebra Cut. This was the narrowest part of the canal, where workers had to dig through miles of solid rock and earth. The mountains loomed high, casting shadows over the trenches. Steam shovels roared to life, clawing at the earth. Dynamite blasts echoed through the jungle, breaking apart stubborn rock. The work was loud, dangerous, and slow. Every day brought new problems. Landslides were a constant threat. After heavy rains, the soil became unstable. Huge sections of earth would suddenly collapse, burying machines and workers. The men dug tirelessly, but often the land they cleared one day would slide back into the trench the next. It felt like an endless battle against nature. The locks were another challenge. These structures would allow ships to travel up and over the mountains by raising and lowering them in large chambers. Each lock had to be perfectly designed. If even one measurement was wrong, the locks wouldn't work. Engineers spent long hours studying blueprints and testing their ideas. They wanted to make sure every detail was right. To build the locks, workers needed a massive amount of concrete. Factories were set up near the canal zone to produce it. Workers poured the concrete into molds, layer by layer. It was back-breaking work under the blazing sun. The sound of hammers, drills, and machinery filled the air. Slowly, the locks began to take shape. They rose from the ground like monuments to human determination. One of the biggest innovations was the use of water power to operate the locks. Engineers designed a system that used gravity to fill and empty the chambers. Water from nearby lakes and reservoirs would flow into the locks, lifting the ships. When the ships were ready to move down, the water would drain away. It was a simple but brilliant idea. The system required no pumps or engines, just the natural force of water. The largest lock gates were truly impressive. Each one weighed hundreds of tons and stood as tall as an 8-story building. They were made of steel and carefully assembled on site. Watching the gates swing open and closed was like seeing a giant come to life. Workers often stopped to stare, amazed at what they were creating. Despite the progress, the work was far from easy. Accidents happened every day. Machines broke down. Workers suffered injuries. The noise, the heat, and the long hours tested everyone's patience. Some workers became discouraged. They wondered if they would ever see the canal completed. But there were also moments of triumph. Engineers celebrated every milestone, no matter how small. When the first lock chamber was finished, the workers cheered. When the first section of the Gaillard Cut was cleared, they felt a surge of pride. These victories gave them the strength to keep going. The workers came from all over the world. Many were from the Caribbean, while others came from the US, Europe, and Asia. They spoke different languages and had different traditions, but on the construction site, they shared a common goal. They worked side by side, united by the dream of the canal. One worker from Jamaica, Samuel, spent his days carrying heavy tools to the engineers. At night, he wrote letters to his family. "The work is hard," he wrote, "but I believe in what we're building. One day, ships will pass through here, and the whole world will know what we did." Engineers also faced moments of doubt. The complexity of the project was overwhelming. The timeline was tight, and the pressure to succeed was enormous. Chief Engineer John Stevens once said, "This is the greatest challenge of my career, but I will not let it defeat me." His leadership inspired the team to push forward. One of the most dramatic moments came during a test of the locks. Engineers filled a lock chamber with water for the first time. They watched nervously as the water rose. Would the gates hold? Would the locks work as planned? The tension was almost unbearable. Then, slowly, the water reached the top, and the gates held firm. A huge cheer erupted from the workers. The locks were a success. As the canal neared completion, the excitement grew. Workers who had spent years on the project felt a sense of pride. They had faced dangers, solved problems, and created something extraordinary. The jungle, which had once seemed unbeatable, was now under control. By 1913, the locks were nearly finished, and the Gaillard Cut was fully dug. the canal was taking shape. On September 26th of that year, a ship called the Gatun made the first complete journey through the canal. It was a historic moment. Workers lined the banks, waving and shouting as the ship passed. Tears filled their eyes. They had turned an impossible dream into reality. The Panama Canal was more than a waterway. It was a symbol of human ingenuity and perseverance. It showed what people could achieve when they worked together. The challenges had been enormous, but the determination of the workers and engineers had been greater. Chapter 8. The Workers' Story. The Panama Canal was built by thousands of workers from many countries. Each person played an important role. They came with different skills, backgrounds, and dreams. But together, they created something extraordinary. Most of the workers came from the Caribbean islands. Men from Jamaica, Barbados, and Trinidad arrived by the shipload. They were strong and hard-working, ready to earn a living for their families. Life back home was difficult. The promise of steady wages in Panama gave them hope. Many of them left their homes, families, and friends behind. It was a hard choice, but they believed it was worth it. When the workers arrived, they faced a harsh reality. The jungle was hot, wet, and full of dangers. Mosquitoes swarmed around them, biting day and night. They worked long hours under the blazing sun, their clothes soaked with sweat. The tools were heavy, and the work was hard. Digging trenches, carrying supplies, and laying tracks took strength and endurance. The camps where they lived were crowded. Small huts made of wood and metal were their homes. Rain leaked through the roofs, and the air inside was stifling. Food was simple, often rice and beans with little variety. Clean water was scarce. The workers faced sickness, loneliness, and exhaustion, but they pushed on. Samuel, a laborer from Jamaica, wrote letters to his wife every week. "The work is tough," he wrote, "but I think of you and the children, and it gives me strength." He dreamed of returning home one day with enough money to buy land for his family. Like Samuel, many workers endured the hardship for the promise of a better future. Not all workers were laborers. Skilled engineers from the United States and Europe managed the construction. They designed the locks, oversaw the digging, and solved technical problems. These engineers were well paid and lived in better conditions. They had larger houses with electricity and running water. Their families often joined them in Panama. The difference between the lives of the laborers and the engineers created tension. Many laborers felt they were treated unfairly. They worked the hardest and faced the most danger, yet they earned the least. Protests broke out in some camps. Workers demanded better pay and conditions. The canal authorities responded by improving housing and increasing wages. It wasn't enough for everyone, but it showed that their voices were heard. Despite the difficulties, there were moments of pride. When a section of the canal was finished, the workers celebrated. They cheered as massive machines moved earth and rock. They laughed as they watched water flow into the locks for the first time. These small victories reminded them of the importance of their work. One of the most dangerous jobs was dynamiting the mountains. Skilled workers placed explosives deep into the rock. Then they ran for cover as the ground shook with a thunderous boom. Sometimes the explosions caused landslides. Workers risked their lives to clear the debris. It was terrifying, but the workers understood the risk. "The mountain fights back," one man said, "but we will win." Another key role was played by the track layers. These men built the railways that carried soil and rock away from the digging sites. The rail cars were loaded with debris and moved quickly out of the canal zone. Without the track layers, the work would have stopped. Their precision and teamwork kept the project moving forward. Women also contributed to the canal's construction. Some worked as cooks, laundresses, and caretakers in the camps. Others ran small businesses, selling food and supplies to the workers. Their efforts provided comfort and support to the men, helping them endure the daily grind. Although they were not always recognized, their role was essential. Workers from different countries brought their cultures with them. In the evenings, the camps came alive with music, stories, and laughter. Men played drums, guitars, and flutes. They sang songs from home, reminding them of their families and traditions. Samuel often joined a group of friends after work. They shared stories about their children and talked about their dreams. These moments gave them strength to face another day. The canal brought people from all over the world together. It wasn't always easy. There were arguments and misunderstandings. Language barriers made communication difficult. But over time, the workers found ways to connect. They learned to respect each other's differences. They became a team. One of the most emotional moments came in 1913 when the first ship passed through the locks during a test. Workers lined the banks, watching with wide eyes. As the ship moved forward, they cheered and clapped. Tears streamed down their faces. It was a moment of pride, joy, and relief. They had worked so hard, and now they could see the results. The workers knew they were part of history. The canal was more than just a waterway. It was a symbol of human strength, determination, and cooperation. Each person, from the laborers to the engineers, had played a role in making it happen. For Samuel and others like him, the canal was not just a job. It was a chance to change their lives. When the project ended, many workers returned home with new skills and savings. They carried stories of their struggles and triumphs. They spoke of the mountains they had moved and the rivers they had tamed. The canal became a part of their identity. Chapter 9. The Gaillard Cut. The Gaillard Cut was the most difficult part of the Panama Canal. It stretched for 9 miles, cutting through the mountains of Panama. At first, it was called the Culebra Cut, but later it was named after David Gaillard, the chief engineer who led the work. This part of the canal would connect the two oceans. But to finish it, the workers had to dig through solid rock, face dangerous landslides and battle exhaustion. The mountains stood tall and firm, like a wall blocking the canal's path. Engineers and workers knew this section would be tough, but no one imagined how challenging it would become. The task seemed endless. Every day, workers dug and blasted through the rock. Steam shovels roared, clawing at the earth. Rail cars carried away tons of dirt and stone. It was hard, loud, and dangerous work. The heat in the cut was intense. The sun beat down on the workers as they shoveled, drilled, and loaded debris. Dust filled the air, making it hard to breathe. Sweat poured down their faces, soaking their clothes. Even the machines seemed to struggle in the heat, their engines groaning as they powered through the rock. The biggest danger was the landslides. The mountains did not stay still. The soil was soft in some places, and the constant digging made it unstable. After heavy rains, the hillsides would crumble. Tons of earth and rock would fall into the cut, burying everything in their path. Machines were destroyed. Tracks were covered. Workers were trapped. Rescue teams worked quickly, but not everyone could be saved. The landslides were sudden and terrifying. The workers never knew when the next one might strike. One landslide in 1912 was particularly devastating. It happened without warning, crushing machines and blocking progress for weeks. The workers felt discouraged. "We dig all day," one man said, "and by morning, the mountain takes it all back." It seemed like the mountains were fighting to keep their place. David Gaillard, the chief engineer, refused to give up. He was a quiet man, but his determination was strong. He worked long hours, studying the mountains and planning how to move forward. He encouraged the workers, reminding them of the importance of their task. "Every foot we dig brings us closer to the finish," he said. His calm leadership gave the workers hope. The engineers used dynamite to break apart the hardest rocks. Workers placed the explosives deep into the ground, then lit the fuses and ran for cover. The explosions echoed through the cut, shaking the earth. Smoke and dust filled the air. When the dust settled, the workers returned to clear the debris. It was dangerous work, but it was the only way to make progress. The steam shovels were the heroes of the Gaillard Cut. These massive machines could dig more in a day than 1,000 men with shovels. They scraped away layers of rock and dirt, loading it onto rail cars. The shovels were operated by skilled men who had to stay focused and calm under pressure. If the machine broke or got stuck, the entire operation slowed down. The rail cars carried the debris out of the cut, moving it to dump sites far away. Without the rail cars, the cut would quickly fill with dirt again. The track layers worked tirelessly to keep the rails clear and in good condition. Their teamwork kept the operation running smoothly. Despite the dangers, there were moments of pride. Each time a section of the cut was completed, the workers celebrated. They could see the mountains shrinking inch by inch. They knew they were making history. "We are carving a path between the oceans," one worker said. "This will change the world." David Gaillard's leadership was crucial. He stayed calm, even during the worst landslides. He believed in the project and in the workers. Tragically, Gaillard did not live to see the canal completed. He died in 1913, worn down by the stress and hard work. The Gaillard Cut was renamed the Gaillard Cut in his honor. The workers who knew him said, this was his greatest achievement. As the years passed, the Gaillard Cut began to take shape. The walls of the cut rose steeply on either side, creating a narrow path for ships. The workers had moved millions of tons of earth and rock. They had faced landslides, accidents, and exhaustion, but they never gave up. Their determination was stronger than the mountains. The final breakthrough came in 1913. The last section of rock was removed, and the cut was complete. Workers cheered and waved their hats in the air. They had done it. The hardest part of the canal was finished. It was a moment of triumph and relief. They could finally see the path that would connect the two oceans. The Gaillard Cut became a symbol of human strength and courage. It showed what people could achieve when they worked together. The workers, engineers, and leaders had faced enormous challenges, but they had overcome them. The mountains that once seemed impossible to cross were now part of a waterway that would change the world. Chapter 10. Opening the Gates. The big day had finally arrived. It was August 15th, 1914. After years of hard work, the Panama Canal was ready. The gates of the locks stood tall, shining in the sunlight. The waters of the canal were calm, waiting for their first ship. Around the world, people held their breath. Would it work? Would this great dream become a reality? The first ship to pass through the canal was the SS Ancon. It was a cargo ship carrying goods across the oceans. The crew on board was filled with pride. They knew they were making history. As the ship approached the first lock, workers stood on the banks, watching closely. Some waved and cheered. Others stayed silent, holding their breath. Everyone felt the tension. The lock gates opened slowly, creaking as they moved. Water flowed into the chamber, rising steadily. The ship lifted with it, as if being carried by invisible hands. The system was working. The engineers smiled, their years of planning and testing finally paying off. The workers clapped and shouted. Their hard work was coming to life. Step by step, the SS Ancon moved through the canal. At each lock, the gates opened and closed smoothly. The water levels rose and fell, lifting and lowering the ship. It was a dance of precision and power. Onlookers marveled at the sight. Some had doubted this day would ever come. Now they saw proof of what determination could achieve. The journey through the canal took hours. The ship passed through the Gaillard Cut, where workers had battled mountains of rock and deadly landslides. The crew looked up at the steep walls on either side, a testament to human strength and courage. One sailor whispered, "This is incredible. We are sailing through a mountain." The ship then entered Gatun Lake, a vast body of water created by damming the Chagres River. The lake was peaceful, its surface sparkling under the sun. This artificial lake was one of the canal's greatest engineering feats. It connected the locks on either side of the isthmus, allowing ships to cross Panama more easily. The crew marveled at its beauty, knowing it was man-made. As the SS Ancon approached the final lock, excitement grew. Crowds gathered near the canal's entrance to the Pacific Ocean. Reporters scribbled notes, ready to share the story with the world. Photographers snapped pictures of the ship, the workers, and the locks. The air buzzed with anticipation. The last gates opened, and the ship entered the Pacific. A loud cheer erupted from the crowd. People waved hats, flags, and handkerchiefs. Some wiped tears from their eyes. It was a moment of triumph, a symbol of human achievement. The canal was not just a waterway, it was a bridge between worlds. For the workers, the moment was deeply personal. Many had spent years digging, building, and dreaming of this day. Samuel, a laborer from Jamaica, stood near the locks, his hands rough from years of hard work. He smiled as he watched the ship pass. "We did it," he said quietly. "We really did it." The engineers were also filled with pride. They had faced countless challenges, deadly diseases, landslides, and financial struggles, yet they had found solutions. They had built something that would last for generations. One engineer, watching the ship disappear into the Pacific, said, "This is not just for today. This is for the future." The opening of the Panama Canal marked the start of a new era. Ships no longer had to travel thousands of miles around South America. The canal shortened the journey between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans by weeks. It made trade faster, cheaper, and safer. Nations around the world benefited from this incredible creation. But the canal was more than just an economic success. It was a symbol of what people could achieve when they worked together. It showed that with vision, determination, and teamwork, even the toughest challenges could be overcome. The canal connected not just oceans, but also people, ideas, and dreams. The success of the Panama Canal was shared by many. The workers from the Caribbean, the engineers from the United States, the leaders who believed in the project, all had played a part. Each person's effort was a piece of the puzzle. Together, they had created something extraordinary. As the celebrations continued, some looked to the future. What would the canal mean for Panama? How would it shape the country's economy and identity? There were questions about control and fairness. Some Panamanians felt the canal belonged to them, not to the United States. These questions would take decades to answer, but for now, the focus was on the achievement. The Panama Canal quickly became one of the most important waterways in the world. Ships from every corner of the globe passed through its locks. It became a lifeline for trade, connecting countries in ways that had never been possible before. The canal was not just a marvel of engineering, it was a gift to humanity. As the sun set on that historic day, the workers began to leave the site. Some walked back to their camps, tired but happy. Others stayed a little longer, watching the water flow through the locks. The canal was no longer just a dream. It was real. It was theirs. Samuel wrote one last letter to his wife that evening. "The canal is finished," he wrote. "We worked hard, and now the world will see what we did. I will come home soon. I am proud of what we built. I hope you are proud of me." The Panama Canal had opened its gates to the world. It was a moment of pride, unity, and hope. The journey to get there had been long and difficult, but the result was worth every struggle. The canal was not just a path between oceans. It was a testament to human courage and determination. Chapter 11. Changing the World. The Panama Canal opened in 1914, and the world changed forever. For centuries, ships had sailed thousands of miles around the southern tip of South America to move between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. Now, they could cross through Panama in just a few hours. The canal saved time, money, and lives. It was a revolution in global trade. Ships from every corner of the globe began to use the canal. Cargo ships carried goods like coffee, bananas, oil, and steel. Passenger ships brought travelers on faster journeys. The canal made the world feel smaller. Nations traded more, businesses grew, and economies prospered. The canal connected continents in a way that had never been possible before. For the United States, the canal was a symbol of power and progress. The U.S. controlled the Canal Zone, a strip of land on either side of the waterway. This gave them great influence over global trade. American ships often had priority, and the money collected from tolls went to the U.S. government. Other countries paid to use the canal, but they also benefited from faster and cheaper trade routes. Panama, the small country where the canal was built, also gained new opportunities. The canal brought jobs, visitors, and investment. Ships passing through needed fuel, supplies, and repairs. Towns near the canal grew, and businesses flourished. The canal made Panama a vital link in global commerce. People began to call it the crossroads of the world. But not everyone was happy. Some Panamanians felt that their country deserved more from the canal. After all, it was their land and their people who had made the project possible. Yet the canal was controlled by the United States. The U.S. military guarded the canal zone, and American laws governed the area. Many Panamanians were not even allowed to enter the zone without permission. The question of ownership began to grow louder. Who truly owned the Panama Canal? Was it the United States, which had built and maintained it? Or was it Panama, the nation that had provided the land and labor? These questions sparked debates, protests, and even violence in the decades that followed. One of the most dramatic moments came in 1964. A group of Panamanian students marched to the Canal Zone, carrying their country's flag. They wanted to raise it next to the American flag as a symbol of shared ownership. Tensions rose as they approached the zone's border. Guards tried to stop them, and a fight broke out. The protest turned deadly. Panamanians mourned their losses, and their demand for control over the canal grew stronger. In the United States, some leaders began to listen. They realized that holding onto the canal forever might not be fair or practical. Over time, negotiations began. Panama wanted full control of the canal. The U.S. wanted to ensure the canal would remain open and operational. Both sides knew the canal was too important to the world to let disagreements block progress. In 1977, a historic agreement was reached. U.S. President Jimmy Carter and Panamanian leader Omar Torrijos signed a treaty. It promised that Panama would take full control of the canal by the end of 1999. The treaty was controversial. Some Americans argued that the U.S. should keep the canal forever, but others believed it was time to return it to Panama. In Panama, the treaty was seen as a victory, a step toward national pride and independence. As the years passed, the canal continued to transform global trade. Ships became larger, and more goods crossed the oceans. Engineers worked to improve the canal, widening the locks and deepening the channels. They wanted to ensure the canal could handle the growing demands of international shipping. By the late 20th century, the canal was a vital artery for the global economy. Nearly 14,000 ships passed through each year, carrying millions of tons of cargo. Countries around the world depended on it. The canal brought nations closer together, making trade faster and more efficient. Finally, on December 31st, 1999, Panama took full control of the canal. The handover ceremony was emotional. Panamanian flags flew high as the U.S. military lowered their flag for the last time. Crowds gathered to watch, cheering and waving. For Panama, it was a moment of pride and celebration. After decades of struggle, the canal was theirs. The Panama Canal remains a symbol of human achievement. It shows what people can accomplish when they work together. It also reminds us of the importance of fairness and cooperation. Today, the canal continues to serve the world, connecting people, goods, and ideas. But the story of the canal is not over. It faces new challenges. Climate change affects the water supply needed to operate the locks. Larger ships require even bigger expansions. Panama must balance the canal's role in global trade with its impact on the environment and local communities. The canal's future depends on innovation and careful management. Chapter 12. Legacy of the Canal. The Panama Canal is more than just a waterway. It is a symbol of human vision, determination, and unity. From the moment it opened in 1914, it changed the world. Today, over a century later, its impact is still felt. The canal stands as a reminder of what people can achieve when they work together. It was built by workers from around the world, men and women who faced danger, disease, and exhaustion. They dug through mountains, drained swamps, and built locks taller than buildings. Each person played a part, leaving their mark on history. The canal shortened the journey between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans by weeks. It allowed goods to move faster and cheaper. Trade flourished, and nations prospered. Ships carrying food, fuel, and materials passed through daily. The canal connected continents, creating a global economy. For Panama, the canal became a source of pride. It brought jobs, opportunities, and recognition. The canal transformed the small country into a vital link in global trade. Its people took care of the canal, ensuring it remained strong and efficient. They knew its value, not just for Panama, but for the world. In 1999, Panama gained full control of the canal. The handover was a moment of celebration. Crowds gathered as the U.S. flag was lowered and the Panamanian flag was raised. It was a powerful symbol of independence and hope. The canal was finally in the hands of its rightful owners. Since then, Panama has managed the canal with great care. Engineers have expanded it, adding new locks to handle larger ships. These improvements allow even more goods to pass through. The canal continues to grow, adapting to the needs of modern trade. But the canal's legacy is not just about trade. It is about overcoming challenges. The story of the Panama Canal shows the power of perseverance. It reminds us that even the greatest obstacles can be overcome with effort, creativity, and teamwork. The canal also teaches us about fairness and responsibility. For years, the question of ownership caused tension between nations. Today, the canal is an example of how collaboration can lead to progress. It shows the importance of listening, negotiating, and respecting each other's rights. The Panama Canal is a marvel of engineering. Visitors from around the world come to see it. They watch in awe as ships move through the locks, rising and falling with the water. They learn about the people who built it, the sacrifices they made, and the dreams they pursued. The canal inspires curiosity and admiration. One visitor, a young girl from Europe, stood by the locks and watched a massive cargo ship pass. She turned to her father and asked, "How did they build this?" Her father smiled and said, "With hard work and imagination." The girl's eyes lit up. She understood that the canal was more than concrete and steel. It was a dream come true. The canal's history is full of lessons. It shows how technology can solve problems, how teamwork can break barriers, and how vision can create change. It also reminds us of the cost of progress. The workers who built the canal faced danger every day. Many lost their lives to disease, accidents, or exhaustion. Their sacrifices should never be forgotten. As the years pass, the canal continues to shape the world. Ships from Asia, Europe, and the Americas rely on its smooth operation. Businesses depend on its efficiency. People around the globe benefit from the goods it transports. The canal is a vital part of everyday life, even for those who have never seen it. But the canal also faces new challenges. Climate change affects the water levels needed for its operation. Larger and heavier ships require more expansions. Panama must balance the demands of global trade with the need to protect its environment. These challenges remind us that even the greatest achievements need care and attention. In Panama, The canal is more than just an economic resource. It is a source of national identity. School children learn about its history. Families visit the locks on weekends. Artists paint pictures of the workers who built it. The canal is part of Panama's story, a story of resilience, pride, and determination. For the world, the canal is a beacon of hope. It shows that people can achieve amazing things when they come together. It reminds us that progress is possible, even when the odds seem impossible. The Panama Canal is not just a path between oceans. It is a bridge between nations. As this chapter ends, we look to the future. The canal will continue to adapt and grow. New challenges will arise, but the lessons of the past will guide the way. The legacy of the Panama Canal is not just about the past. It is about the promise of what lies ahead. The Panama Canal stands tall, a testament to human effort and vision. It is a reminder of what we can achieve when we dream big, work hard, and believe in the power of unity. The story of the canal is not over. It continues to inspire, connect, and transform the world.